your host, Mondi Lewis. This evening's show will be a bit different as we have a video to play for you. And it really is a video of contributions from the members of parliament of the St. Lucia Labour Party on the COVID-19 management or mismanagement, as many St. Lucians would agree. We heard again some frightening news coming out in terms of the increase in infection, the variant ever present in St. Lucia and in the region, and again, this government's inability, or I don't even know what, inability to just listen and follow the science, as we've always said, in terms of testing visitors upon arrival and allowing for the quarantine period. But another major issue that a lot of persons are facing is, what are the incentives for persons who are fully vaccinated, persons who have received both doses of the AstraZeneca and who have completed their 2 weeks, 14 days post the second shot? How will we achieve good immunity? And lots of questions coming from the public, and we see that we are at about 25,000 of the first dose and about 13,000 of the second dose. And we're wondering, how is it possible that 70% of the population can receive all the vaccines when we've seen that the number has slowed down? There's a mistrust in the system, and somehow we need to get it back on track. But before we go into the video, I just want to shout out persons that we met in Barron's Drive this evening. Honorable Philip J. Pierre did meet candidate for Suffra Fortijac, Ms. Emma Hippolyte in Suffra this evening. And, sad but hopeful. Persons have not been employed, some young people, 3 years out of school, no job, and, almost hopeless. But the Labour Party is there to inspire youth, inspire persons, and the youth economy, we are sure, will benefit the many talented St. Lucians, not only in academics, but whether it be modeling, whether it be music, whether it be the arts. There is something for everyone, and we were really excited after the elections when we formed the next government of St. Lucia to bring the youth economy. And I know the ladies at Barron's Drive that I met this evening, they will be well placed and well poised to take all the opportunities that the Labour Party government will have in store. But I'll take you to the video this evening, and afterwards, Dr. Ernest Hilaire, the MP for Castries South, will join me for this evening's program.
A 5-month state of emergency imposed by the government in response to the COVID-19 pandemic takes effect in St. Lucia as of Monday, 17th May 2021. According to the Prime Minister, this was necessary in order to continue with a curfew in the country. However, the bill for the SOE was passed in the House of Assembly on Tuesday, 4th May, in the face of strong and vociferous objection and condemnation from the parliamentary opposition. The SLP senators also voiced its opposition when the bill was in the Senate on Thursday, 13th May. Given the importance of the effect of an extended state of emergency on life in St. Lucia, the Labour Party declared the 5-month SOE as unnecessary on political, constitutional, health and economic grounds. Sean Edward, the Denry North MP, launched the opening political salvo.
Mr. Speaker, let me say this morning that this extension being sought in this House today has absolutely nothing to do with COVID management. But instead, this is a ploy for a failed government to buy extra time to finish projects and to try and gain favor with the electorate on the eve of elections. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister would have been in a better position today to come to this House and to ask for the House to be dissolved and give St. Lucians a date to go to the polls to decide which of the parties they want to govern the affairs of this country moving forward. You have presided over the affairs of this country for 5 years. 5 years. And you want to come in the chamber today to ask for an extension because of COVID? Mr. Speaker, all of the Caribbean jurisdictions that held elections last year did so during COVID. They did so during COVID. Why can't we do the same? But I understand that when you look at poll results and you realize you're not doing so well, and you need the extension, COVID is, Mr. Speaker, the way out. The Prime Minister said that with the current or existing legislation, the COVID Prevention and Control Bill, he does not, to paraphrase, have the latitude to be able to institute or apply a curfew. And that is correct, Mr. Speaker. But what do we need the curfew for? What do we need the curfew for? The time has come, Mr. Speaker, for the people to decide whom they want to preside over their affairs in this COVID environment. You said you have tried. You said, Mr. Speaker, that you have handled the situation in a manner that makes you the envy of the rest of the Caribbean and at one time the world. And I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, that, and I know I run the risk of being misconstrued here this morning to make it seem as if I am insensitive to people who are vulnerable. I have said here, and I will say again, Mr. Speaker, that COVID affects everybody. My own family is not immune. My elderly mother is not immune. And there's nothing I would want to see more than for us to have a handle on COVID. But I am saying today, Mr. Speaker, that the request for an extension of the SOE, where the government is trying to buy an additional 5 months to roll out projects and to reclaim lost political ground, Mr. Speaker, cannot be right. And this is tantamount to an abuse of power. And when you look at cricket, if I were to use a cricket analogy, as I've been using in this house for some time now, Mr. Speaker, there are some rules that are on the cricket books, modes of dismissal. But it would be considered ungentlemanly for you to resort to some of those to get a batsman out. Mr. Speaker, yes, the Constitution makes provisions for the Prime Minister to extend the tenure of his government all the way to October. But is that necessary, Mr. Speaker? To what extent, Mr. Speaker, must we sit by and allow that blatant abuse of power, Mr. Speaker?
Several other SLP MPs supported this line of attack, including the Castries South MP, Ernest Hilaire.
Let's go on to the political. You know, I am convinced, Mr. Speaker, that the extension of the state of emergency for 5 more months is all about politics. Nothing to do with COVID. I am convinced in my mind about that, Mr. Speaker. This is the same government that said to us, during the peak of the second wave or whatever, the spike, that we had in place a voluntary curfew. Remember this, Mr. Speaker? A voluntary curfew. And they said it was fine, it was working. And they said we didn't need to have any requirement to have it. St. Lucians would cooperate. There was a voluntary curfew. And that St. Lucians, largely in their view, were abiding by it. But why can't we go back to the voluntary curfew now? Why? Why can't we? And I always remember we were told that the COVID Act would have provided all the requirements to manage COVID. Then all of a sudden, something clicked. And then a state of emergency was introduced. So remember, there were protocols and there was a voluntary curfew. But something happened along the way that made them introduce a state of emergency and now want to extend it for 5 months. What is that something? Is it results and analysis coming from Barbados? The irony of it is the longer they take, the worse they make it for some of the others, Mr. Speaker. So, you know, anyway, that's their headache. That's not mine, Mr. Speaker. You see this, Mr. Speaker, this extension, it's all about control. It's all about control. And maybe in many ways, it exposes that colonialism really does not have a conscience. It doesn't have a conscience. We are leaving that now, that colonialism does not have a conscience. In the midst of a COVID pandemic, when people are crying out for some empathy, for some understanding of their situation, they have been squeezed further and further.
The Vieux-Fort North MP Moses Moussa Jean-Baptiste took the political argument further, describing the SOE as a tool of oppression by the government.
There was this whole debate, and Mr. Speaker, I noted that you did caution that we should veer away from talking about election dates and all of that. But it is interesting that 4 weeks and a couple of days before the anniversary of the 5-year term of this government, that they would come here to seek an extension to the state of emergency. I have said so before, Mr. Speaker, and there is this big debate about October and about the date of elections. I am so interested in the 5th anniversary of the election of this government to governance in this country, Mr. Speaker. The 6th of May will be on Thursday, and 4 weeks from that will be the 6th of June. The time is up, Mr. Speaker. No matter how they try to extend state of emergency, no matter how they talk about October, and everyone is so interested in the 90 days all of a sudden, no matter what they do, they have mismanaged COVID-19, and the 6th of June 2016 is 4 weeks away, and the time is up. They went to the poll, we went to the polls on the 6th of June 2016. 5 years is the 6th of June 2021. And so, Mr. Speaker, the debate on the extension to the state of emergency in St. Lucia, for me, comes against a very sad and unfortunate background. Many St. Lucians, Mr. Speaker, have now concluded and are expressing openly that this extension to the state of emergency is a license for this government to continue what many view as abuses of its authority during the state of emergency. Many view, Mr. Speaker, many view the government's actions, many view the actions of the state during the state of emergency as selective in its application, Mr. Speaker, and a tool of oppression in various forms.
Aligned with the political considerations were the legal and constitutional reasons against it. These were raised first by the SAP political leader Philip J. Pierre, and then by the former Prime Minister and Castries South MP, Dr. Kenny D. Anthony, in that order.
On the 6th of June next month, the elections of this country were 5 years ago. According to the Constitution, Mr. Speaker, the Parliament had held its first meeting, I think, on the 15th of July, and constitutionally, the Prime Minister has 90 days from the 15th of July to call general elections. So, Mr. Speaker, we could have come back here, back to this honorable house, any time between now and the 15th of July to make amendments to the state of emergency legislation or motion. So we are coming, today is the 4th of May, we have up to the 15th of July to amend the the SOE legislation, but we are doing it 6 weeks before the 15th of July. It's up to you. The Parliament can meet up to the 15th of July. The Parliament can meet up to the 15th of July. The present state of emergency ends on the 16th of May. We could have come to this Parliament today and extend it till the end of June. We could have extended it to the end of June, but we are extending it until the middle of October. I'm just stating a fact. So it's up to conjecture that why are we doing it up to 5 months? This is a very simple question. Why do we up to 5? Why 5? That's all I'm saying. Why are we going up to 5 months when we could have gone up to 4 weeks and do it sometime if it is necessary? The government is assuming that it's going to be necessary until October. That is an assumption. That's all. The government's assumption. And it's up to conjecture for why are we assuming that we need the state of emergency until the 15th of October? Because it's reasonable to assume, because constitutionally the government can call elections by the middle of October. They are extending the state of emergency until October. This is the simple conjecture. And I'm saying to myself, Mr. Speaker, that there is no reason why you keep the country under that tension until October, when if the situation had got worse, there would be no need to extend the state of emergency. By the Prime Minister's own admission, the only thing the state of emergency does is that it can cause you to decide curfew hours. I want to bring you, Mr. Speaker, to Section 5 of SI 2021 number 68, and it says operation of business establishment or office, and it says when under the COVID Prevention and Control Act you can cause a business to open or close. Under Section 6, Mr. Speaker, under the sale and disposal of intoxicating liquor, it says that you can say the times under which you can sell intoxicating liquor under Section 6 of the COVID Prevention and Control Act. So if the reason for the curfew is to stop people from gathering and to stop people from getting involved in selling of alcohol in restaurants, etc., all the government had to do was to decide on the hours based on the COVID-19 Prevention and Control Act. Under Section 5 and Section 6, Mr. Speaker, the government could have decided that restaurants and liquor establishments have to be closed at a particular time. So it is left for us to ask the question, why until October? Why the 90 days? When COVID was at its worst, Mr. Speaker, we did not come to this parliament for such a long extension.
Reference has been made to that constitutional background. And the leader of the opposition made reference to the fact that the House has to be dissolved by July the 15th, pursuant to Section 55, subsection 2 of the Constitution. And thereafter that date, Mr. Speaker, Section 56, subsection 1 says that the general election shall be held within 3 months after any dissolution of Parliament, a further 3 months. The question, however, Mr. Speaker, is this: what happens when the House is dissolved? And assuming any possibility of an extension of the dissolution and general elections taking place all the way in October, for argument's sake, and I'm not prescribing, Mr. Speaker, the reality is that there was no need to have a state of emergency to extend to October, because the Constitution does allow the government to recall Parliament during a state of emergency. Look, for example, Mr. Speaker, at what Section 55, subsection 5 says. Look at it, Mr. Speaker. It says, Mr. Speaker, Section 55, subsection 5,
If after a dissolution of Parliament and before the holding of a general election of members of the House, the Prime Minister advises the Governor General that owing to the existence of a state of war or of a state of emergency in St. Lucia, it is necessary to recall Parliament, the Governor General shall summon the Parliament that has been dissolved to meet. But unless the life of Parliament is extended under the provision of subsection 3, that doesn't apply, that's a state of war. Of this section, the general election shall proceed and the Parliament that has been recalled shall, if not sooner dissolved, again stand dissolved on the date appointed for the nomination of candidates in the general election. In other words, Mr. Speaker, the government of St. Lucia could have simply have decided extend the state of emergency, assuming that you go through the list of factors which I have identified, up to July 31st, and then should anything happen between July 1st and July 31st, ask the Governor General to reconvene because of the state of emergency to deal with any serious outbreak of the COVID pandemic. So, why are we doing this? What is this for? What is this for? Does the evidence disclose that you're in such a crisis that you have to take the route of interfering with the fundamental rights of the citizens of the country for an extended period until October? That is a question.
Dr. Kennedy Anthony, and before him, the SLP political leader, Philip J. Pierre, giving the legal and constitutional arguments against the 5-month extension of the state of emergency in St. Lucia, commencing Monday, 17 May 2021. The Labrie South MP, Alva Baptiste, brought up the economic arguments against what others called an oppressive act by the government.
Mr. Speaker, has the Prime Minister taken time out to reflect and consider the full impact of his political gains on the business community and the wider issues of St. Lucia's economic recovery? Mr. Speaker, the sudden impact of the pandemic and the initial shutdowns and the SOEs to reduce the spread of the virus, a number of small businesses were on the verge of bankruptcy. Small business that generate important jobs and economic activity in St. Lucia were heavily impacted. Extension of the state of emergency, especially those relying on self-employment and micro-enterprises, may disappear because they have less liquidity and buffers to continue. Small business development, Mr. Speaker, plays a key role in creating economic growth, employment, and improved living conditions. Small business, Mr. Speaker, is a provider of goods and services and a generator of the public revenues needed to underpin economically, socially, and environmentally sustainable development, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is not a time for curfew to stall our recovery efforts. This is a time to retrofit business procedures to adhere to the COVID-19 protocols, with government measures to support effective stimulus demand, in particular on the consumption side, Mr. Speaker. Specific support measures for most affected sectors and investment plans should also contribute to reactivate the economy. We had to adjust social policies to support those who are impacted most by the crisis, Mr. Speaker, particularly the most vulnerable and those who may have fallen into poverty during the pandemic. Today, we should be debating a package of policies relating to economic recovery, Mr. Speaker. This stage must aim at bringing the economy back on track.
The imposition of the state of emergency in St. Lucia by the UWP government has been linked to its management of the COVID-19 pandemic, a public health issue. but do health or medical considerations support a 5-month extension of a state of emergency in St. Lucia at this time? This was the question taken up by the Castries South MP, Dr. Ernest Hilaire.
Let us start, Mr. Speaker, with the medical issues that we've had to confront with, even whilst having a curfew. If you ask St. Lucians, and I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, even you, when you saw this document extending a state of emergency for 5 months, you wondered what the hell is going on. I'm sure you wondered, and I'm sure you were tempted to pick up your phone and say to the Prime Minister, you cannot do this. I'm sure members opposite, they cannot convince me that they agree with this because they are on the ground campaigning and they're hearing what St. Lucians are saying. And if you ask them in an honest moment, whether St. Lucians have been satisfied with the medical management of COVID, they will tell you no. Have we done enough testing in St. Lucia? Have we done enough, Mr. Speaker, education, especially in regards to vaccination? We've had exchanges in this House about the respiratory hospital. And I heard a member from Castries office speak about how the World Bank praised them about the respiratory hospital. But yet when the member from Castries stood up and spoke about the lack of proper oxygen supplies at the hospital, members opposite got very nervous and reacted. But it was true. It was true. There are solutions that have died because we have not put in place the proper facilities required for COVID management. And as a result, we've had deaths, more than all the OCS countries added together with Barbados. That is reality. That is reality. This is how they have managed COVID. Does the state of emergency make a difference to the incompetence of this government? You see, because they did not put the people first and foremost. When we spoke about it, they said we'll be mischievous. And they insulted the people of St. Lucia by saying that it was the Labour Party that caused the spike in COVID. Traumatizing people who are already traumatized by the COVID pandemic. There are people who died, they did not get the kind of attention. Does the SOS solve that problem? That's incompetence. And you know what they said to the people of St. Lucia? And they keep doing it. Almost everyone who died had underlying conditions. And I've said to them, they keep reminding me of the trial in the US of Floyd. He would not have died if the white officer had not put his knees on his neck. He had underlying conditions. Just last week, and I can read it for you, the Ministry of Health issued a statement saying how cases were decreasing, saying how we were managing it better in this country. And it makes me ask the question, don't we have triggers or we have indicators that will trigger action? So if we're saying cases are decreasing, it's been managed better, deaths are declining, why are we having the longest extension of the state of emergency? Why? Think about that, Mr. Speaker. You are talking about opening up the country to cruise ships and to more flights from the UK and flights from the US, but you're extending the state of emergency. I mean, I need somebody to explain the logic of this to me, Mr. Speaker. Our people are traumatized, and the state of emergency is not helping our emotional trauma, Mr. Speaker.
That was Dr. Ernest Hilaire, the SLP Castries South MP, ending our review of the arguments by the St. Lucia Labour Party against the imposition of a 5-month state of emergency in St. Lucia starting Monday, 17th May. Thank you for listening. I'm Kirby Allen.
I pledge that an SLP government will remove income tax on any person earning less than $4,000 per month. So that means that
from grade 10 in the civil service will pay no tax under the St. Lucia Labour Party. We can find an X-ray done at the hospital. True. I try to weigh the two St. Lucias. Well, members of parliament come to boast and beat their chest about all their projects. And I say to myself, if I fall down, or my constituents or a relative of mine falls down and is rushed to the hospital with all of the big projects and multi-million dollar and all of the glossy pictures, we can find an X-ray done at the hospital. True. So I want that to sink in for a little while, Mr. Speaker. I want it to sink in. The two St. Lucias that we are talking about.
Welcome back to SLP Town Hall Tuesday. I'm your host, Mondi Lewis, and I have with me Honorable Ernest, the MP for Castries South, my MP actually. Good evening, Dr. Hilaire.
Hi, good evening, and certainly a pleasure to join you once again on Town Hall Tuesday. And it's always delightful to discuss the issues confronting this country, especially as we approach the final days of this government. It gives us an opportunity to share our perspective with the listeners, and I certainly want to say a special good night to all the listeners out there. And viewers, not just listeners. Okay.
And you said final days, and I'm really excited because it is 19 days until June the 6th. Okay, yeah. And that would be 5 years since this government won a general election. So again, 19 days, St. Lucia, and really exciting times.
Yeah, and I mean, if we just, before we go on to COVID, just reflect on this. If you ask the average St. Lucian, when would they expect elections? They tell you within 5 years of the last election. We expect elections to be governments to last 5 years since the last election. This government is trying to rewrite the convention to say that really it's not since the last election, it is really since the first sitting of parliament. Most St. Lucians never knew the constitution said it's the first sitting of parliament. Most people do not even know what date was the first sitting. Did not know when it was the first sitting of parliament. But everybody remember when the elections was held. And now they're saying it's not just the first sitting anymore. We have an additional 3 months for us to call the elections. I think people want the democratic, right to be exercise the democratic right and to vote and to select the government. But it's even more important that we have a pandemic. We have major challenges facing this country, and this government seems stalled on dealing with those issues. And we really need a reset, and St. Lucians should be given an opportunity at the soonest for them to be able to decide whether or not they want to continue in the state that they're in now, or whether it is that they want an opportunity to to press the reset button and to see if our issues that we face can be addressed in a very meaningful and sustainable way.
But Dr. Hilaire, you hear so many mixed messages, and for me it's really mixed messages. You hear one of the MPs, they're going to win 16 seats. Okay, well, call the election to get your new mandate. Yeah. And then you hear that the Prime Minister almost insinuating that, he doesn't have time to think about the election because he has a country to run. So I don't understand what the move of this government is. You're the workers, and you've been doing great work according, to all of them. But, the proof on the ground, and again, I was telling our viewers that we were in Sufra today, and just a lot of distressed communities. And I know even in Castries South, Cicero, from where I'm from, the unemployment, the challenges that everyday people face. So you're really asking yourself, what is this government doing, one, for the livelihoods of people, and now you're questioning even their role in terms of lives, because we heard the CMO today talking about a potential fourth wave. So what has accounted for that, really? We've seen a dramatic increase in numbers. We're at 77 deaths. And no one seems to be giving us how are we going to, one, slow this down, how are we going to get more people vaccinated, and when do people who are fully vaccinated, like myself and like you, get to enjoy the freedoms of having taken the vaccine, doing what is responsible.
I mean, it's really interesting the way that you've, captured it, because let's start off with a point about the government and the Prime Minister saying that he's not even focused on the election.
Yes.
He's working. I mean, I listened to a program this morning, and somebody was saying about how if you go to Babono, you'll get Baba Green. But if you go to OKU, you won't get metformin. And in many ways, it reflected, in a very simple, powerful way and popular way. The person was making the point that, we've seen a lot of Baba Green, but the basics that people need for civilized living, proper health care, is not being addressed, and it is expressed even in our management of COVID. If the government had worked so well, and they certainly, so successful in what they're doing, and that they're so confident that they have been working well for the people of St. Lucia, then they probably should call the election. But they're not calling the election, yet they're boasting that they're so focused on dealing with the problems of the country. The truth is, in our last St. Lucians, when last did you hear the Prime Minister sit down with the command center or at GIS addressing the COVID situation in the country? When last have you heard it? It's almost as if the government has gone into hiding on COVID. That's literally, every night I used to get a press release, from the government. Now I have to rely on Choice, scoreboard, the summary that Choice distributes for me to know what was the latest in the country. I don't get the press releases anymore. Before, they used to tell you which communities the cases were from. You don't get that anymore. You used to hear of the deaths. I mean, I'm just noticing the scoreboard now shows 77 and not 75 like it was on Sunday, and realize that we had 2 more deaths. And something as critical, and you're so right, as what is happening now has to be addressed. We have to hear our leaders, both the technical and the scientific leaders, and our political leaders, addressing where are we going to go in St. Lucia. If we are on the verge of a 4th wave, then surely somebody tell us what's going on. What is behind that spike? Let's forget the false narrative that it was backdoor, it was Labour Party march, and everybody denied it had anything to do with tourists reopening the borders. And everybody had to wonder, well, how did the UK variant come into St. Lucia if it had nothing to do with opening the borders? But we're witnessing an increase. What is fueling that increase? We need to know. Yes. And for me too, you made an important point, just when we were starting to think of how it is we can open up the space for people who are fully vaccinated, because if persons were told that they should vaccinate because it would restore some normalcy to their lives, then surely they want to start enjoying the normalcy. And if people who are not vaccinated do not see any benefit in their view, in their plain view, to getting vaccinated, they won't be encouraged to be vaccinated. There must be an inducement, an incentive. And I'm not talking about giving people money or anything like that, but you have to want to believe that getting vaccinated is the right thing to do. Now, you can say to them, 77 deaths. That's the consequence, the probable consequence of not vaccinating. But, we were told most of them had underlying conditions. So if I don't have underlying conditions, why should I get vaccinated? And all those issues we have to deal with in the society, Monday. The pace of vaccination has slowed down considerably. And there has to be a national dialogue as to how we will get persons vaccinated to take our numbers up. And surely now, the new phenomenon you have to watch, how do you get people to go and take the second dose? Because there are a lot of people now I'm hearing who say they're not going for the second dose.
I was almost one of those, because the first one was really bad for me. And I wasn't sure. But then I was like, I want my freedom back.
Yeah, so individuals who took both doses are now wondering, what is the real benefit of getting vaccinated again? So you need to be able to encourage people to get vaccinated, but we also have to deal with the spike. Yes. So we need information. There needs to be that dialogue. And I'll tell you something. Speaking to a friend today, and he really pointed it out to me. The government made this about the people and not about the virus. And I said, but what do you mean? Explain this to me. No. Because, you know, I was like, explain. Tell me, no. And this is a well-educated, well-trained person, technical and scientific. And saying to me, look, if you approach it as saying, how can I control the people so they won't get the virus, as against saying, how can I control the virus so the people won't get it? And he said to me, there's a major difference between the two. That the government, and this ended up being the police versus the people, yes. The COVID wardens versus the people, the government versus the people, rather than flipping the concept and the understanding, which then leads to a different course of action, to say, look, let us see how we can control this virus so we are protecting the people. And to make it more about the people, than make it more about the virus than about the people. And maybe some societies are structured that way. Sometimes it's the orientation of leaders. Rather than engage the people, have a full-blooded educational program, massive community mobilization, reaching out to the people, talking to them, transparency, honesty, putting out more technical people in the forefront rather than the politicians. And again, the point of why should a politician be head in the command center? Why couldn't it be somebody with technical and scientific skills that people have confidence in? So when they speak, people in the population does not believe they're promoting any particular interest.
But okay, let's say that, you know, politicians want to take the forefront. But because we were in an election season, I think that is what really intensified what happened in St. Lucia. You needed both parties to lead on this, to tell people, hey, this is no mama guying by this government as per usual. Yeah. This time they're serious. But people have already lost the trust. They've lost faith in the government, that you see a reluctance to even listen to them. You know, they feel like it's suppression. They want to prevent the opposition from demonstrating, for people to coming out and protesting against the ills of this government. So, you know, you just have a lot going on. Whereas, had you done like a lot of countries and say, let us sit at the table, we both have persons, and especially during an election period, let's talk about this, I think it would have been a lot different.
But even if they decided, you know what, we're not going to include the opposition, but to do it in a way and approach the management of the COVID pandemic in a way which forces the opposition to fall in line. Because you can do that. You can do it in such a way. You reach out to the people, you embrace the people, and you speak to the people. The opposition almost has no choice but to, you know, let's fall in line, because there's a national effort there, and people are supporting it, and people are going along with it. We will be left behind, so let's jump on the train too. Rather, so you could have decided, let me bring the opposition with me, and together we do it. But if you're a little uneasy with the opposition, you don't really want them on board, still do it in a manner that forces them to want to jump on board, because you'll be left so far behind. True. But instead, this government approached it with bravado. We're the best in the Caribbean. You're a waste of time, and you'll have the super spreaders. How do you tell a population? Think about, I mean, this is one of the greatest acts of stupidity. If you think about it, Monday, how do you want to win the trust of the population? Not my supporters, the population. We have a pandemic. It's not a national matter, it's a global matter. It affects everybody around the globe. In my little piece of rock, I have to deal with it. And I want people to follow me, to listen to the protocols, to cooperate. And I'm going to say to almost 50% of St. Lucia, y'all are the ones who spread it. Exactly. Y'all did this, y'all did that. How does that make sense? I mean, you virtually isolating a significant part of the population by profiling them and accusing them and chastising them, and you know, you cannot win a battle that way. You know, and rather than win over people and bring them along, they didn't do that. They actually created a division and tribalization in trying to fight the virus, and I think that has worked against the government and has made St. Lucia one of the worst managed, you know, countries in the world, per capita, of course, because our numbers are relative to our population. And I think it could have been done so much better. But this government is so full of, you know, bravado and a lot of boast and loud noise that they really messed it up.
St. Lucia, We have to take our first break, well, with Dr. Hilaire, but we'll be right back with SLP Town Hall Tuesday.
We can't find an x-ray done at the hospital. True. I try to weigh the two St. Lucias. Well, members of parliament come to boast and beat their chest about all their projects. And I say to myself, if I fall down, or my constituents or a relative of mine falls down and is rushed to the hospital with all of the big projects and multi-million-dollar and all of the glossy pictures, we can't find an x-ray done at the hospital. True. So I want that to sink in for a little while, Mr. Speaker. I want it to sink in. The two St. Lucias that we are talking about.
Welcome back to SLP Town Hall Tuesday. I'm your host, Mondi Lewis, and tonight my guest, Honorable Dr. Ernest Hilaire, the MP for Castries South. So Dr. Hilaire and I were speaking about just COVID-19, the mismanagement by this government, and you know how they missed the opportunity to get this under control. And now with a fourth wave on the horizon, with 27,000 people vaccinated with their first dose, and I think we're about 17,000 on the second dose. The question is, and even for me and my peers and my family, what are the luxuries that a vaccinated person, because I mean, a lot of persons were fearful. People had their doubts. You know, a vaccine was developed so quickly, but you thought that for your health, for that of your family, that you needed to be safeguarded. But you see, we still have an SOE, and one that the opposition has rallied very strongly against, because there is a great suspicion and a lot of evidence to show that the SOE is really to impede the opposition from campaigning. But Dr. Hilaire, you too, and your family, you've taken, and I know we continue to encourage persons to take the vaccine, but with no hope, no end in sight to this, really, what do you think can be done for vaccinated people to get some sort of normalcy back?
Well, a few days ago, I was looking forward to hearing what the new protocols would be for vaccinated people, and if we assess what's happening in the U.S., and I think the U.S. has probably gone the furthest in terms of being more liberal now. And I think part of it is because they really want to incentivize people to get the vaccine to reach herd immunity. Certainly all of us looking forward to it, and we're hoping that the PAHO and WHO and them would make some announcements that can allow some shift in the protocols. Like the US certainly followed the CDC guidelines, and they've decided to become more liberal. In the context of St. Lucia on the verge of a fourth wave, it looks really unlikely that we would, change the protocol somewhat, and I'm not sure if St. Lucia will do so in isolation from the other Caribbean countries and the regional proclamations that are made. So we have an issue. We need to deal with the fourth wave that we are about to see before us. How do we deal with it? And I think in that context, vaccinated persons who were hoping to return to a state of normalcy or approximating normalcy will be disappointed. But under circumstances where we would not have had a fourth wave, I think we should have had a national dialogue as to how we can relax for vaccinated people. And I'm not saying we should do so now, because we do have the threat of a fourth wave. And I am one who believes, and I think the Prime Minister and them had said so, that there were trigger points, that if there was a certain number of cases, if the rate went to a certain level, they would clamp down to bring it back down, and then when it's under control, relax the measures, which is how I think we should do it. That if there is a spike and increase, we should clamp down somewhat, especially in areas where, because we don't get the data, but I'm sure some of the doctors and the scientific people are getting the data to show what's happening, because you might have a spike and it might be very localized. You know, when you think of certain regions or certain gatherings, whether school or workplace, whatever. So you can have a spike, and it can be very localized and doesn't affect the rest of the island. But we don't see the data as the public, and that's part of the problem too, because I'm sure some professionals are seeing the data, but the wider public, to have more confidence in what's going on, they have to see the data and to understand what's going on and to help clear your mind. And if you understand what's happening, you might be more receptive and accept certain things. But I was certainly looking forward to, I would say to you, as a fully vaccinated person, I'm not speaking as a politician, I'm speaking as a citizen. I was hoping that I would be able to go to, a restaurant and not having to wear my mask. I was hoping that, Red Carnival Band could probably organize a bubble fete, and only vaccinated people can come to it, I was hoping that there would be certain allowances for persons who are already vaccinated, that we would not have to limit it to 10 persons meeting in a home. If everyone is vaccinated, we should have as many people as comfortable, because you want people to believe that if I get vaccinated, then I can go to my friend's home and 4 families can be there and have a Sunday barbecue and not be conscious that it must be 10 people and you cannot gather. I would want to know I can go to a restaurant and eat until, whatever hour and feel comfortable that I don't have to wear my mask because I can prove that I'm vaccinated. I would want to know that I can go to a little fete somewhere and not worry. I know there's vaccinated people with me. And I think, people will starting to look forward to seeing some of that normalcy for vaccinated people.
I am people.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know that it would be unfair to expect that. And maybe we should have, and when the time comes, we should have a discussion and a dialogue about that. We need to get people to be vaccinated. And we need people to believe it is the right thing to do. We've not had enough public education in this country. We've not had enough public education, Monday. I mean, we've had vaccination programs in St. Lucia before. I recall growing up as a young boy hearing so much about vaccines. I don't know we've really gone all out. And government has taken some of the monies that they've borrowed. They've borrowed hundreds of millions of dollars in this country. But we've never had a massive vaccination campaign. And again, I remember public education campaigns in St. Lucia, and I'm not calling the name in any political sense, but the Barbara Jacobs and the Jerry Georges and them.
And you hear the jingles about those
and the jingles and things. And not that they have COVID jingles, but those things seem to be so predominant in my ears growing up. You just saw it, you felt it, and you had a sense that there was a massive education program to inform persons. I'm not sure we had this.
You're right, because I drove to Sufra today and I listened to the radio. And you would think that there are clinics all over the island doing vaccine programs going on, and you would hear it on rotation. Remember that you can get your vaccine on Monday at this and... But I never heard that on my way to Sufra or on my way back. So, how is the message? So I get it on Facebook because I actually go to the Ministry of Health and Wellness Facebook page. But then I remember telling a friend, I said, something as important as that, you couldn't pay $20 to sponsor it.
Yeah,
so
you're right.
So it would reach more people.
Yeah,
I literally go, I make it my business to go to look for the updates. And we want to say that people should take their responsibility, people should go, but people aren't. People are not doing that.
But just have community meetings. I mean, yes, you have to limit it because of COVID. But, you go through a community with criers and loudspeakers. And I mean, I never felt there's a national mobilization drive. There's a national public education campaign to the scale and extent needed for the severity of what we were facing.
Agreed.
So now, where do we go forward from here? And certainly, as the Central Labour Party, we have to start thinking of elections in the next few weeks and how do we move forward. I think there has to be an attempt to re-engage with the people of St. Lucia. The opportunity was missed. We've paid a very high price for it. But we still need to, because it has to be about fighting the virus to make sure that people are protected. And we have to be able to engage with the people and to say to them, look, we're going to be very open and transparent with you and give you as much information as possible, and to help us fight the misinformation that is out there. Because there's a lot of misinformation, a lot. I read to a grade 4 class yesterday at the Ave Maria School, and a child was even pointing out to me some of the misinformation that exists out there. So there's a lot of misinformation, and we have to be able to say, look, this is a different group of men and women that's going to be overseeing the fight against COVID, and we want to engage you, the public, and try to reset the whole narrative with you. Now, you're already starting off at a disadvantage because people will have experienced
Yes.
a year and a half and more of a particular style. Their own thoughts have been cemented, whatnot. But we have to be able to re-engage the people. We have to be able to promote more of the scientific people, the medical people, and to say that they have credibility, that they're not going to serve any political agenda. You have to change the command center from, in my view, from being chaired by a politician and give it to a more technical person. That doesn't mean they have the final say and they will, just decide what happens in the country, but they are the ones that will be seen as persons most competent, in my view, to lead the national response, and the politicians providing oversight and, ensuring that it is done in a particularly consistent with the mandate of the government. And you see that happening with Biden now, the kind of stepping back of the politician and giving more oversight and direction to how things have to be done. I really believe we need a massive national education campaign. We have to tell people about why they must have the vaccine. You must be able to give somebody a basis for wanting to be vaccinated, and that has not been done. I'm not sure. We are more enlightened individuals, so we will go out and do it, and we have reasons for wanting to do it, whatnot.
But it's scary though. I know some enlightened people who just won't take it, and I think, even from a personal point of view, some of us will have to make the decision that you're not vaccinated, so perhaps I can't be with you. And I did have to tell somebody that today, that, okay, great, we work together, and that's all well and good, but you have to wear your mask 24/7 when you're around me. And she's like, but you can't get it. I said, no, I can get it. I probably won't be affected like you if you get it, but I can get it, and I don't want to ever bring that to somebody unknowingly.
Yeah. But although the data, certainly from the CDC, suggests that the chance of you getting it, the chance of you spreading it, the chance of you getting sick is very slim. But of course, they breakthrough cases. But even then is the right posture to take, because, I would say to you, you're not taking it. And because I take it, you believe you can avoid the protocols. No, you have to, let me not wear a mask, but you wear yours. But I think, though, we have to be able to sell a compelling story why people should get vaccinated, and more importantly is to show them the benefits of getting vaccinated. And the benefit is not just to say to them, you won't get COVID, whatnot, but you can now live life differently. And that comes back to your question that you ask: what are the benefits for the people who've been vaccinated like yourself? How can you approximate normalcy? And I believe as a society we need to look at some small measures that will make people feel, it was worth me being vaccinated because I can now do X, I can now do Y. And I think there are a few things we can do as a society.
I want to be able to sit in a restaurant and, and have a good meal with my friends, and, you want that you don't have to go home at 9 o'clock because maybe it's a vaccinated restaurant or something, and the restaurant takes, a lot of restaurants I know have put in a lot of measures to ensure sanitization, etc. But, make it a safe space for persons who are vaccinated to come in. And I think as people see more normalcy, you want to be normal too, I know everyone, but, I'm never going to take away people's fears and apprehensions against being vaccinated, because as you rightly said, the misinformation out there, and that was one of my great disappointments, that you had all of these stories coming out. So there would be 5 as to why you shouldn't take it, and only 1 for why you should take it. And then
we need to flip the coin.
Even the posture by some professionals, and you just haven't seen somebody die yet, that's why you're not. That's not how you get through to people. You reason with them. So for me, I really hope that the government starts this dialogue and really re-engage, as you say, the citizens, because people want to know. And for me, another one was the consistency in the reporting, because one day the press release would be written in a certain way, giving certain information, and then 2 days later it has changed. So again, the trust in the system, and I think these things require trust. So you see the literal difference with the U.S. Trump, rules
trust.
itself, no trust. And Biden has been knocking out their milestones in the United States. So I'm saying, I do think that will happen in after the next general election when you have a new government. So I'm putting that out there.
Yeah, but a new government that would start off by being very bold in how it
Yes.
approaches the matter, and we have to be able to make people believe that we are doing what's in the best interest and that people really matter, and that we are putting people first, because you have to feel that they are putting you first. And there's a lot of misinformation out there, like you said, and a lot of individuals are in their mind made up about a lot of stuff. But another simple issue, the one of quarantine.
Yes.
I mean, if you are fully vaccinated and you return to St. Lucia, should you be quarantined if you're coming from the UK or from the US? If you do go to the US now and you come back, should you go into quarantine?
And for 14 days at
And
that.
for 14 days, I mean, finally somebody, at least you're hearing the Prime Minister says he's in quarantine, although there have been sightings of him. So I'm not sure how much quarantine he's in. But forget about him for now. I mean, if somebody goes to the US for a quick business trip or something, do they have to go into quarantine and they're fully vaccinated? Maybe we should start doing away with this for sure.
But maybe it will come, Dr. Hilaire, and that's a good segue into what's going to happen in a few weeks. The UK is opening up. We have cruise ships expected to come back to St. Lucia. But for me, now that the CMO is talking about this fourth wave, and I really feel like it's like a fifth wave, but this fourth wave, how do you do all of that at the same time? Okay, the first question is, we're talking about quarantining. The UK is opening up, so people will travel. Cruise lines are coming back to St. Lucia. What is that protocol going to look like?
Well, I mean, I don't know what the government will decide. I would want to believe, and that's the point I was just making, that if you are going to come to St. Lucia and you're fully vaccinated, you should enjoy the benefits of being fully vaccinated. My daughter just came from Barbados this evening with her mom, with Lisa, and basically they did a PCR test before they left on Saturday. They got to Barbados on Saturday. They did another PCR, but they got the result Saturday night. And because, Lisa is fully vaccinated, from the Sunday they could have roamed because she's fully vaccinated. So by doing the PCR test and showing that's negative, she can roam. Now, maybe you should ask the question, should you even have to do a test because she's already, fully vaccinated. But of course, you say there's a small percentage, I'm not sure the exact number, 0.1% or something, where you might still be able to carry the virus.
But what is the difference between being able to do that in the bubble and doing it if you're coming from the US and the UK? Is it?
Well, there's a bubble. St. Lucia has a bubble, but they don't have a bubble for St. Lucia. So, I mean, this bubble was a construct just to justify why the Prime Minister went to Barbados and he didn't quarantine.
You're right.
There is a requirement in Barbados when you learn that you have to do both. Anya had to do the test as well. And she had just come from St. Lucia, where she had done the test 2 days before, and she still had to do it again. But I would want to believe that if we are opening up to cruise ships and there will be cruise ship passengers to St. Lucia, they will be all vaccinated people. I would never want to believe that we would be allowing individuals to come in on cruise ships who are not vaccinated and be allowed. I mean, you wouldn't come on a cruise ship and just stay in the cruise ship. So if you're going to come in a cruise ship, you will want to visit the island. And I pray to God that we would not allow non-vaccinated persons to come on cruise ships to St. Lucia. And even those who come by plane, the UK is opening up, like you said, whatnot. the non-vaccinated individuals should follow the protocols that we have spoken about previously, that you cannot just come to St. Lucia with
What
the
are you
lax...
talking about? People were coming before the vaccine was out. People were coming
Well, that's
and
true.
not having to do a
That's true.
second
Yeah,
PCR test. So I mean,
that's true.
I
That's
don't
true.
know.
That's true. And you know, I think it was the CMO today who said that the UK variant is in circulation in St. Lucia. And we just don't seem to learn. I mean, we just do not seem to learn. And we blame all other reasons why. Of course, this is how this government operates. I would want to believe that immediately we can see some action to contain the spike. We would love to see some data as to exactly the characteristics that are involved. You know, I mean, is there specific localities involved? Is there special age groups involved? Is there commonality in residence, in occupation, in gathering? So you can get a sense of what this is all about and take swift action to contain it.
And also, you know, we saw the spike correlating with the opening of schools. So is that also maybe a reason for the spread and the increase in numbers? And again, you just don't have enough information, and that is the issue. People don't have enough information.
And we need to be... I saw a friend of mine write on Facebook, I think you unfriend him or I won't mention his name, but you know, he was trying to do analysis saying that the spike has only started because the COVID wardens program has been discontinued.
I expect nothing different from him.
You don't expect anything different from him. But anyway, and I was saying to him, you can't just say those things. You need to have the data for you to prove that, because someone can also say that it has coincided with the reopening of school, and that, you know, the spike we're seeing is probably gatherings at schools. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying you can't just make those spurious assumptions. But solutions need to know the data so you can proper analyze what's happening, because sooner or later it can become a national, like you say, a spike, you know, a national surge as against, you know, just a small local occurrence. So we need to see the data. We need to know what's going on, and for us to be able to analyze properly what's happening, and let us move quickly to contain it. We really need things. But the government seems to have disappeared. You're not hearing Prime Minister in press conferences. You're not hearing the Chairman of the Command Center in press conferences. You're not hearing the Minister of Health in press conferences. You're not giving people a chance to ask questions and to understand what's really happening. And whenever you do this, there'll be speculation.
Yeah.
And then that even undermines the national effort. So somebody should come out and give us the information. And as you said, if cruise ships is going to come in the next month and a half, because that's what was announced by the minister and I think the Prime Minister, then let us know the conditions under which they will come. Let us know.
Well, the CM, I suppose the press conference today by the ministry was, I thought, oh wow, they're still here. So
exactly. That's how
it was like, oh
really
wow, you guys are still here.
Yeah.
But just a lot to discuss, something, Lucia. But I'm due for another break, so we'll be right back with SLP Town Hall Tuesday.
I pledge that an SLP government will remove income tax on any person earning less than $4,000 per month. So that means that from grade 10 in the civil service will pay no tax under the St. Lucia Labour Party.
Welcome back to SLP Town Hall Tuesday. I'm your host, Mondi Lewis, and my guest, Honorable Ernest Hilaire, the MP for Castries South. And again, I just have to say that all the time because I'm very proud to be in his constituency. And Cicero is my home. But even then, I was home today and I saw the blocks. I saw the young men just around, sitting, gambling. The young ladies, the mothers, the parents, people are just around, and it has never been that way. So yes, you know, there's always been a block culture where I live, but it was always that in the morning people went to work, afterwards they came back home and they limed, and you know, and then you went home, you slept. But this is constant. This is a staple right now. This is what the community looks like, and I don't see any relief for persons, any income support? And Dr. Hilaire, you probably will be best placed to say the reality in constituencies.
I mean, you're so right in what you said, that COVID has exposed the worst of our social economic frailties, and that a lot of persons have lost their jobs, and that it is exceedingly difficult. One would have hoped that government, in its national response, would have reached out to the most disadvantaged and the most vulnerable to mitigate the suffering and the pain that is being experienced now. And let's not play games with this. We accept that individuals have lost their jobs, the economic dislocation, and that there are challenges. But you're not sensing that there is any care or concern with the plight and the welfare of people right now. It's almost as if the government is stalled. There is nothing being talked about. At least the immediate period after COVID, there was talk about social stabilization and economic support. It came very late. St. Lucia was probably the last country to announce what it was doing. But we hear nothing now. There is no food being distributed for the persons who cannot have a hot meal. There is no food. There is no food items being distributed. There is no income support. There is virtually nothing being done now for people who are vulnerable and marginalized and disadvantaged. And you speak out the young men just are wrong, and the unemployed, the single mothers, whatnot. It is very, very real. Very real. And you, of course, one was not saying that everybody would get the same level of support from immediately after COVID until now. You can understand that there will be periods when government has to stop. But you cannot not have anything anymore. That you just have to have a program. Whether you give people every 2 months, you do something, every whatever. There is too much despair in the communities right now. Too much despair.
Dr. Hilaire, but I don't agree with you, though. You say you're not saying that it cannot be done every week or every month. But I disagree with you, because when you have less than a mile of road being built for $20 million, I'm like, why not? Why can you not feed people? Why can you not ensure that they have electricity? Why can you not ensure that all children have laptops? So I mean, I understand you're being, very gracious, generous, that we can't support people forever. But my thing is, the Prime Minister boasted on some show that he borrowed $500 million in 3 months. Where is it? And for me, I don't accept that we cannot do something that is sustainable for persons to at least have a meal, 2 meals a day, that all children in school can have 2 meals. They will have breakfast and lunch and be able to do their work. And COVID has affected our children. So I don't accept that, that the government could not have sustainable programs until we get back to a place of normalcy.
Yeah, and again, I guess the point I was trying to make is in the immediate period after, nobody knew how long the COVID pandemic would last. So you probably would say everybody gets X amount of money, and then you realize, wow, it is costing money, and you
but
may
we
have.
didn't even use any of the funds. We used NIC money.
So I was coming to that point that you can, and the point I was making is like, you can understand governments initially, we offer something, now we cannot do it anymore, but nothing has been done, and I guess probably is the way I express it. That I probably wasn't clear enough. There has to be some program. There has to be money found somewhere to offer some hope to people in St. Lucia. And it is extending to not just food items, but even medicines, for example. Even medicines. I mean, I have said it in the house repeatedly. I've had to help buy medicines for individuals, pay for x-rays, for all different kinds of services that our people need. And we cannot continue like that.
I don't know. Do you think that there's been an increase in, or is it that because of COVID and the financial situation, that now more people are seeking your assistance? Because I feel like we are inundated with requests every single day at whether it is at campaign headquarters or leader of the opposition, the number of persons who need medical assistance. So I'm just wondering whether it is that now there's an increase in health issues, or is that because people have lost their income that they are desperate and they're seeking assistance?
Well, I think it's both. I think both people have lost their income and they are seeking assistance. And I get individuals who are independent, middle class, work, persons who did not have to ever go to a politician, come in and look for some support. But you also have, and I believe, the psychological trauma that we're going through as a society. We've never been through this before. And it's probably the worst we've had in our history, maybe post-emancipation, or, well, not emancipation, probably slavery, and maybe the 1930s after the riots of that period. There's so much psychological trauma. Right now, individuals who've lost their jobs, they have a sense of hopelessness, the anxiety, and people have been affected medically. Yeah. They have been affected medically because your whole well-being is associated with how you feel as an individual and the state of your mind. There must be so much psychological stress, Monday, that you've not been able to feed your child for 2 days, the sweet water you've had to give your child, and you're wondering where the next meal will come from. How will you pay the rent? The individuals have told you they've not paid their rent for months, and landlords are on them. They're even ashamed to say to the landlord because, some landlords will say, okay, you can't pay it every month, but maybe pay it every 3 months or every 2 months.
Yes.
And they just cannot pay it. They can't pay their water bill, their light bill. They're under so much stress. And you're not getting a sense in this country that anybody care about them. And of course, as it is, elections is approaching, the government is prolonging that suffering rather than get over the elections, requirement. They're prolonging it. So what does it do? They spend monies on an election campaign, and you can't. Okay, they have to campaign, but let's get it over and done with. In my constituency, they clean up campaigns. So a candidate is spending money. He doesn't care about meetings, vision. It's just money. So
yes,
you just have
money. I've never seen anything like it in Castle South.
they have cleanups.
I've never seen, but I'm very happy that you finally got the light on the field first, Dr. Hilaire.
No, I didn't get the lights. I was not allowed to get the lights.
No, but it was you, as far as I'm concerned, because after 4 years of every time going into Parliament, speaking about these lights, and we finally got it. So I'm saying, for me, it is the representation that you gave to the people of Castle South. Even if you had your own supplies, you spent your own money, but I don't know, you might need to give it to, you might need to do it on another.
This is so, I read, somebody sent me, a screenshot of the Prime Minister's post that is actually listening to the cries. How does a politician believe? Maybe I'm not made to be that kind of politician. How do you believe you are gaining points with such blatant dishonesty and disingenuity like this?
And disrespect.
And disrespect for the people like that. When the individuals in the community know that I wanted to do the project. They knew I went out there. I got donors to give me a generator, to give me lights, to do this, to do that. And I would not get the permission to put the lights. And then an election campaign is coming on, and you're putting on lights. Now, you're not putting on modern poles like every other community.
I asked, whether it was clotheslines we were going to use those poles.
You put those select poles. But, we're discussing that in the context of COVID to make the point that the government has put itself in a very precarious situation. So rather than deal with COVID, and rather than deal, especially this coming spike, they are in electioneering when that could have been done over and gone with, and then the country is back on focus. This thing is still lingering on. And if you know the Prime Minister, well, I'm sure he's thinking of how he can probably even postpone elections to next year.
Well, some of the headlines that I see that he is not worried about, you should be worried about elections also, because it is our democratic right to exercise our franchise. And after 5 years of that horror story, I think, St. Lucians need to breathe again.
And why you going to just continue with this and continue with
Yeah.
it? And if we have another
Especially if
spike,
you're winning. You're winning.
yeah, you win in 16 seats.
win
Mine
in-
is the first seat that will be lost. So just call the election and finish it out. You have a fresh mandate, and then you deal with
Exactly.
COVID, and the country is at rest again, and we can move on. But we trying to deal with a spike,
Yes.
and at the same time, campaign is going on. At the same time, you know,
But it's
people,
not even campaigning for all, because the things that this government gets away with in terms of protocols and the meetings that
tell
are
you.
held, you know, we wouldn't dare, because I mean, now if our new commissioner, deputy commissioner, I mean, just all the questions around that and that appointment and how he has targeted St. Lucia Labour Party, what red shirts you
Yeah.
will arrest.
let me tell you.
So it's,
Anyway, let's not even talk
yeah,
too much
that's
about
sorry,
this,
St. Lucia. That is
because-
for another show. So back to
and thing.
COVID-19.
So, but you know, it's a very serious point on it, that the country cannot afford to be having, you know, hanging over its head an upcoming election when we have to still deal with the threat of the COVID situation. I think the government is disrespecting the people. It's showing disdain for the people, and it has to come to terms with the fact that it cannot continue to do that to the population. Elections would have, by any measure, taken place by now in normal circumstances. 5 years is in 19 days.
19 days.
And you're telling me, in the midst of a pandemic, when other countries decided to have elections as required and to move on, St. Vincent, Trinidad, St. Kitts,
Jamaica.
Anguilla, Cayman Islands, I think, or Turks and Caicos,
Bahamas,
Bahamas, Bermuda. I mean, there are about 8 or 9 countries that had elections since March last year. And you're saying to me, you're the only country that is just prolonging this agony and prolonging this agony and prolonging this agony. And just when people thought, okay, the COVID crisis was kind of stabilizing, we are faced with another spike now. And still at the back of our minds is elections and election campaigns. Come on. I mean, I think it is wrong and grossly wrong. And this government must be made to pay for what they're doing, because this is psychologically distressing. I mean, I am out there, you know, in the communities, and I know
Yes.
how people are feeling and expressing their sentiments about this.
Yes.
It's just not right. And they are suffering. They want answers. They want to know, you know, will they get support? Will they get this? Will they get that? And they want to know what's the true state of affairs in the country. How much money have we really borrowed? Because people are asking you about all the roads that have been built, how much money was borrowed. And I have to say to them, no, government didn't take a loan, you know. That's on credit.
Yes.
And that credit has to be paid over the next 5 years.
And it is not reflected in
No, it's
in
not.
in the estimates.
No, it's not.
So-
It's not, and it's certainly not in the
Crazy.
debt of the country. It's on credit, and the credit has to be paid in the next 5 years. And you're talking about over $100 million, and nobody knows the true state of affairs of this country when it comes to the debt of the country and the financial situation of this country. And we are just limping on, as if somebody's waiting for some miracle to happen. I'm not sure what that miracle is, but they're probably waiting for some miracle to happen and for them to remain in power. But you win in 16-1, so get it over and done with, and let's move on.
I agree. But Dr. Hilaire, for whatever absurd reason, we're out of time, St. Lucia.
Already?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's 10:30, so we have to wrap up. But Dr. Hilaire, I think, you know, for us, the message is still to St. Lucians to get vaccinated.
Yeah, well, I'm a big advocate and
Yes.
proponent of vaccination, and I encourage all my friends. And even when I go to homes to visit people, I ask them, have you been vaccinated? And try to encourage them to be vaccinated. I believe the more people who are vaccinated, the better for the country. I hear the comments, I hear the concerns, and I'm looking forward to be part of a genuine national effort to get St. Lucians vaccinated, to educate them about vaccines, and I'm looking forward to enjoying the benefits of being vaccinated. I can tell you, I'm really, really looking forward.
2 years with no carnival.
Yeah, to the benefits of being vaccinated. And let me take the opportunity to encourage all St. Lucians to get vaccinated. The best hope for our country, the best hope to return to a state of normalcy is to get vaccinated. At least if you're not going to get vaccinated, observe the protocols in the strictest way possible. We need to avoid another spike in St. Lucia, and if each of us can play our parts, either by observing the protocols or getting vaccinated, I think we will be assisted, each and every one. So my final words to you, St. Lucians, is to get vaccinated. And if you're not going to get vaccinated for whatever reason, and I cannot convince you to be vaccinated, follow the protocols in the strictest manner possible.
Thank you, Dr. Hilaire, for joining me on another SLP Town Hall Tuesday. And, whenever the elections are called, if you're not on the show with me, maybe the next time it will be when you're my MP yet again.
I hope you work election day and you're out there in the community. So
I'm not sure yet if I'm working for you or Honorable Philip.
You can't allow the first seat to be lost to be cast yourself. So you have to be.
Okay, I'll come count my ballots. It's fine. But St. Lucia, again, thank you for joining us for SLB Town Hall Tuesday, and please be safe. Have a good evening.